Hello, welcome. In this video, I'll be sharing with you a simple way to take your economics to the next level. What I'll be sharing with you will enable you to be able to analyze any markets in economics. I'm not referring to market like the perfectly competitive market or the monopolistic market or the monopoly market. I am simply referring to the goods and services markets. The takeaway at the end of this video will enable you to be able to analyze any markets that you face in academic economics. So let's get straight to it. In order for you to be able to analyze any markets perfectly, or in order for you to be able to have the knowledge to analyze any market, you need to know 5 things. Number one, you need to know the goods in the market. Number two, you need to know the buyers or the demanders of that good. Number three, you need to know the sellers or the suppliers of that good. Number four, you need to know the primary factor affecting that good. And the fifth, you need to know the secondary factors affecting that good. So let's get straight into it. Number one, the good. That is, for any market, there has to be a good or a service that is being traded. So for example, in a rice market, the good is rice. In a money market, the good is money. In an exchange market, the good is the currency you're exchanging. So the first question you need to ask yourself in a given market that you have is that what goods and services are being traded, or what goods and services is being traded in the market that you have. Once you figure that out, then you can move on to step two. You figure out who are those buying that particular goods or that particular services, that is, who are the demanders. So the demanders are those people that will represent how you understand the demand curve for that market. So for example, in a rice market, the demanders are people that are buying the rice, for example, the consumers, the households. In a money market, the demanders are the economic agents that need money for specific reasons, for example, speculative purposes, precautionary purposes, and transactionary purposes. So the economic agents are the demanders of that good, which is money. So once you figure out who are those that are demanding or who are those buying those goods and services, then you move on to the third, which is you figure out who are those supplying that particular goods and services that is being traded in the market. So a good can't just come out of nowhere. Someone has to be producing it. So usually the producers or the people that are in authority are those that are supplying the goods. So again, for an example, in the rice market, the producers are the farmers. So they are the ones supplying, and most likely they are also the source of the sales in the market. So we consider them as the supplier as much as we consider them as the producer. In the money market, the supply of money comes from the central bank or from the Fed. So the central bank of the country has the authority over the supply of money. Hence, that makes them represent the supply aspect of the money markets where money is being traded. And if you look at the exchange market, the suppliers, for example, let's take a currency, the United States dollars. The suppliers of the United States dollars are those that are not in need of the United States dollars, or those that want to get rid of their United States dollars in order to get another currency. Then, by default, they are supplying the USD into the exchange markets. Once you figure out who are those that are the suppliers, then you can move on to the fourth, which is to figure out the primary factor, or like I prefer to call it, the focus factor. Usually at the introductory level, the focus factor is usually the price of the good itself. That is the price of the good that is being traded in that market. That is usually the focus factor. For example, in the rice market, the focus factor is the price of the rice. That is, how much do you have to spend in order to get the rice? That is, how much will the rice cost you per unit or per kg or whatever the measurement is. The focus factor is usually what is represented on the vertical axis when we represent the market in a demand and supply format. So whatever is on your vertical axis is the focus factor, and whatever is on the horizontal axis is the quantity of the good in of itself. Let's try and apply this understanding to the money market. In the money market, the good is the money in of itself. So which means the focus factor has to be the price of the money. That is, what will it cost you to acquire the money. In this instance, the cost of acquiring the money or the price of acquiring money is the real interest rates. So the real interest rate in the money market is going to be the focus factor. If we take this to the exchange market, the good in the exchange market is the currency of a particular country. The focus factor or the primary factor is going to be the price of giving up that currency or the price of buying that currency, which is nothing but the exchange rate. So the exchange rate is the focus factor in an exchange market. Now that we have figured out all these four things, the last thing we need to figure out, which is the fifth, is to figure out the other factors. So usually a good is affected by a number of factors, either from the supply side or from the demand side. The primary factor is usually the price. Anything other than the price of the good will be considered as a secondary factor. It is important to get a distinction between the primary factor and the secondary factor. The primary factor is usually visible on the graph, but the secondary factor is usually hidden within the curves on the graphs. What do I mean by that? For example, let's take the case of demand. We all know the simple law of demand that says the higher the price, the lower the quantity demanded, and the lower the price, the higher the quantity demanded, given that all other factors remain constant. So if price changes, we have a movement, and price is represented on the vertical axis and quantity is represented on the horizontal axis. So which means a change in price causes movement. However, a change in any of the secondary factors, for example, income of the consumer, taste of the consumer, choice of the consumer, the weather, price of substitute good, price of complementary goods, and a number of other factors. If any of these other factors, which we consider as secondary factors, if there is a change in them, because they are secondary factors, they do not cause movement along the demand, they simply just cause a shift of the demand curve. So this is why it is important to make a distinction between the primary factor and the secondary factor. Like I said again, the primary factor is usually the price of that good that is being traded. So in the money market, the primary factor is the interest rate. In the exchange market, the primary factor is the real exchange rate. In a loanable funds market, the primary factor is the interest rate. In an aggregate demand and aggregate supply market, the primary factor is the price level, that is the inflation in the market. In the labor market, the primary factor is the wage. However, any other factor other than this primary factor that can affect the goods, then that factor will cause a shift and not a movement in either the demand or the supply curve. Hopefully in future videos, I'll be able to go deep into explaining the analysis of movements and shift in either the demand in a market and the supply in a market. If you keep note of these 5, I hope it will help you understand how to analyze any market, because before you can answer any question or before you can understand what is going on in a particular market, you need to be able to figure out these 5 things. Once again, number 1, you need to determine what good and service is being traded in this market. Number 2, you need to understand who are those buying those goods or service. Number 3, who are those supplying those goods or service. And number 4, the price of the good, which is the primary factor or the focus factor, and any other factor that affects the buying of the good or that affects the supply of the good, that factor will be considered as a secondary factor. In addition, primary factors like the price of the good, any change in it will cause a movement along the demand or movement along the supply. However, any change in any of the secondary factors, given that the primary factor does not change, will cause a shift either to the right or to the left, or a shift outward or inward in either the demand or the supply curve. Let's give an example using the labor market. In the labor market, the good in of itself is the labor. Who are those buying the labor? The people that are buying the labor are the firms in the economy. So firms, businesses are those that are buying the labor. Thus, the demand represents the actions of the firms. Third, who are those supplying the labor? The people supplying the labor are usually the households. Once we figure out these first 3, then the fourth one is, well, what is the price at which this labor is being bought and sold? And that is nothing but the wage. So in this instance, the wage per hour, or however it is being calculated, the wage will represent the primary factor, which means any change in the wage will affect the Demand for labor will affect the supply for labor and will cause a movement along the demand for labor and the supply for labor. And lastly, the secondary factor. Any other factor other than wage will cause a shift either in the demand for labor or the supply of labor. In a particular country, when people immigrate into that country, the workforce is likely going to increase, which means most likely the labor force in that country is going to increase. As a result, in that economy, more people are willing and available to offer their labor. So, which means in that case, the supply of labor is going to increase. But the reason why the supply of labor is increasing, or the reason why the supply of labor is changing, is not because of the wage, which is the primary factor. No, rather, the supply of labor is changing because of a secondary factor, and in this instance, it is the immigration of people into a particular country. And this will end up affecting the market mechanism. So figuring out these 5 things is very important and essential in your ability to be able to analyze and understand the mechanism of any market that you're trying to analyze. If you enjoyed this video and you found it beneficial, please leave it a like and subscribe to the channel. In the future, I'll try and make more videos like this in order to break down some important concepts that may be of help. Thank you very much for watching. See you in another video. Bye.